It's okay. Alright guys, now don't go tearing my head off just yet. I understand that we're all psychologically conditioned not to say anything bad about the Caped Crusader unless he's being written by a post-Sin City Frank Miller, but it is okay to admit that some of his stories don't entirely work, even if they do have a reputation for being better than they actually are. You see, the wonderful thing about superhero comics is that you can pretty much get away with anything while writing them, regardless of how silly the premise might be, and Elseworld comics and similar stories from Marvel just might be the perfect embodiment of that kind of creative freedom. Sometimes they result in genuine classics like Superman Red Sun by Mark Millar and Neil Gaiman's 1602. But more often than not, you get stories like Gotham by Gaslight, which are fine, but don't quite live up to the inherent awesomeness of its own premise. Published in 1989, Batman Gotham by Gaslight was written by Brian Augustian with artwork by Mike Mignola, the latter of whom is best known for his work on the Hellboy series, and was DC's first official Elseworld story. Taking place in the late 1800s, the story follows a Victorian Industrial Revolution era Bruce Wayne, who, after returning from a lengthy trip in Europe, begins his crusade in Gotham as Batman. Coincidentally, around the same time, Jack the Ripper apparently arrives in the city and begins his sick work upon the poor women of Gotham as well. And this is where the disappointment comes in. You see, despite the fact that the book has a really interesting premise, it doesn't really do anything with it. We don't see 19th century steampunk versions of Batman's gadgets, and it doesn't really give us anything in the way of Victorian-era versions of his villains, and the few characters who we do encounter aren't all that removed from their main series counterparts. Harvey Dent is still a two-faced lawyer, no pun intended, Gordon is still a great cop, the pre-Gordon commissioner is just as crooked as they always are, and Alfred is still the ever-loyal butler. They just kind of have a 19th century makeover, and that's about it, and lack any pronounced characterizations that make them appear as men of their time beyond a 19th century look. And despite the fact that the book is basically sold on the premise of Batman versus Jack the Ripper, that actually doesn't factor into the plot as much as you might think. You see, throughout the book, the fact that Jack is involved in these killings doesn't really factor into what Batman is doing for the most part. It's brought up here and there, but it barely seems to be on his radar throughout a good chunk of the book. In fact, the only reason that he gets involved is due to a mid-story twist, but is otherwise mostly about him getting started as Batman in this era's Gotham, and deciding what that actually means for him in the city. But even then, it's not like we see him do any real detective work on the matter. It's just a series of panels and pages of him looking over notes and photos, and fails to give us any real idea as to how detective work might have functioned in those days, nor does it have anything to say about society in that period and how it viewed crime and who tended to be the victims of the police's wrath. It does have to be said, however, that the book is only 40 pages long, and because of this, it's never boring. It's very briskly paced and moves on from plot point to plot point very quickly and ensures that you're never bored. And it also has to be said that the artwork by Mike Mignola is absolutely fantastic. Every visual is appealing, the 1800s Gotham is stunning, and even if the writing doesn't give us interesting takes on these characters, the artwork sure as hell does. And if there's one reason to check out this book, it's absolutely for Mignola's pencil work. All around, I'd say the book falls flat into browsing territory. If you can get a copy for free, I'd recommend checking it out, but otherwise, don't spend your hard-earned cash on it. So until next time, please be sure to subscribe, like the Nerd Hub on Facebook, check out our main site, check out my own personal site, Trey's Take On, follow us on Twitter, and please consider supporting the Trey Griffith Patreon to support this series and others like it. Until then, let's hope that the animated film can do a better job with this premise than the comic did.